Well, obviously it opened the door for me quite a bit. I mean, you know, originally it was supposed to be 5 2-hour movies down in New Zealand. I had the honor of working with Anthony Quinn that whole time, so I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot of stories I can't tell here, but you know, it parlayed into this amazing series that just kind of swept the world. We passed Baywatch as the #1 show in the world and had a 7-year run. They wanted to go 3 more years, but because of that success, I got a call from Majel Roddenberry, who said that she had a series that her husband wrote back in '69, and I'm a big Star Trek fan. So to be able to play the first captain after Captain Kirk that he created was quite an honor for me, and to actually go into his house in Bel Air and sit at his office. She's kept it the same way that it was when he passed away in the early '90s. And that became, Universal actually offered me another 3-year extension on Hercules, and I was afraid, and it's kind of happened anyway, but I was afraid to become the Gilligan of my show and not get any work as anybody else. So I wanted to do something different, move on. So I took that series, and it was 5 years up in Vancouver. So I essentially, from 1993 to 2005, I was pretty much out of America. Obviously Canada was closer shooting Vancouver, but I was gone for a long time. The work was there, and I loved it. You know, I could focus on it, and you're working those 12, 14-hour days, so you sort of focused on just doing that work. And for the first 5 years on Hercules, I was single, so there was nothing really in the way in terms of, I don't mean the negative, but my focus was just the show and show only, and I could give it the time that it needed. So it was, to me, it was great. I loved it and loved every minute of it. Hollywood's accepting of a lot of things. I mean, you can say you're just a straight-on independent, and that's enough to get you in trouble in Hollywood. Just myself, being conservative, being a Christian, being someone who does even faith-based movies has certainly hurt my career within Hollywood. I'm not getting calls like I used to get. I used to read for pilots all the time. I wrote for one this year, one. So I've been developing my own through my own production company, and actually we just sold one to the Hallmark Channel. But you know, it's just, you get to a point that for a city that claims tolerance, it has none. And I've gotten to a point too now that I don't have tolerance for them anymore either. To me, it's like, you know what, I honestly don't care what people's political beliefs are. I don't care what religious beliefs are. It doesn't affect me either way. Why does there have to be such a hatred to somebody within this industry just because you have a different point of view? Especially in a city that claims, you know, industry that claims to be liberal, claims to be tolerant, claims for, you know, freedom of speech, yet they have none for anybody else that disagrees with what they say. I think they've seen that the market was there with passion, but there was such a negative backlash on Mel Gibson because they just didn't want that to be successful. It was weird. I mean, I know Jim Caviezel very well. We had the same manager for about 7, 8 years, and the stories he told me, just this whole thing about, you know, I guess let's not portray the Jews in a bad, well, Jesus was Jewish, and yeah, you killed him. I mean, it's like, it's kind of there, it's in history books. But it did so well and so big. And I think the next movie sort of was Blindside. That came out and did very well. And so they kind of opened up and said, okay, maybe we start looking at this a little more. But I think the biggest step for these faith-based movies is that the technology has gotten so much better and cheaper for cameras, and crews are, you know, everybody wants to be in this business. Nobody says, oh, I just fell into this, no matter what side of the camera on, you're in it because you enjoy doing it. And I think that more and more people are going to start making more of these faith-based movies because there's a huge audience out there. And Hollywood found out the mistake they made with Noah. Number one, why hire an atheist director to direct a story out of the Bible? And they spent, I think, roughly with P&A and everything was close to $200 million. But they're going to make more and more of these now because, you know, it is called show business after all, and they've got to raise that white flag eventually and say, you know what, you know, there's an audience out there that they call the flyover states, you know, but these are people that want movies that have good moral messages, have good values, and teach what's in the Bible. Well, I mean, it's based off the book from this gentleman hiding over in this corner over here right now, Neil Schulman, and it was a big hit back in '79. And what's interesting is he predicted the future, which is really quite uncanny if you look at it, because everything the book talks about, that novel, talks about what's happening with our government right now and what's happening within the world right now. And you see the changes. You see our government in America getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And people can sit there and poo-poo that. They don't want to believe it. But you see the government taking over more and more things. And I try to tell people, I said, tell me where the government, when it's a big government, where it's been successful. How is our public education? How's the post office doing? How about the IRS, which is really just a bunch of bullies? You know, it's amazing. Whatever they put their hands on, they wreck. This country was built Well, number one, it was built on Christianity, but it was built on individuals. That's what it was built on. It was built on the back of people that took the chance and took the risk, that built the country, built their businesses upwards, ended up employing hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people and creating products that not only America wanted, but the world wanted. And now we're starting to punish people who are successful, which is very strange when this country is built on those people going for it and becoming successes through all the failures they suffered, but until they reach that success. We're destroying it. We're penalizing it. Look at California. Look what we're doing for businesses out here. We make it so difficult. We have a president right now that claims to be the most open president this country's ever had. He's by far the most secretive president this country's ever had. There's been more scandals following this president than any other president. I've already listed a couple with the IRS and Benghazi and the border, all these things happening. They're far bigger than Watergate ever was. And yet nothing happens here. Nothing. It just shows you the mindset of America is changing so much. And what the Democrats found out back in the 60s, and they've just amplified it over the last 50 years, is that if you promise free stuff to people, they'll vote for you. It's as simple as that. So I'm a firm believer in term limits. If the president gets 8 years total, Congress, no more than 6 years each. That's it. Get new people in there, because all they care about is making sure their careers go 40, 50 years. And they don't do anything. Our country just is like this. And I'm talking about both sides of the political fence. I said in the last election, I said, vote everybody out. Everybody. Let's get new people in there, 100% new people in there. Yeah, it didn't happen. But, you know, history repeats itself because people don't read history, and that's the biggest problem out there right now. I think what the public is seeing, what these writers are seeing, they're coming out with, they're seeing the changes in America, so they're trying to project what they think is going to happen down the road. Blade Runner. Look at the way our cities are growing now. Look at the way they're starting to look. It's a little bit of Blade Runner thing going on here. And where's it going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Because technology just amps up and goes so quick. In the last 50 years, we've gone way beyond what we've done in the last thousands and thousands of years combined. And it's just going to keep going faster and faster. You know, I'm sure iPhone has iPhone 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 ready to go. Just, you know, they spit them out when they can because it's a marketing technique. It's a way to keep, you know, business profitable, and they know people will come in and buy their products. So it's not going to slow down, and it's just, it's up to us as people to finally get sick and tired of it and say, hey, enough is enough. And I think that's starting to happen. I think more people are starting to rumble. And that's why if you're conservative, libertarian, whatever you would be that's right of the liberals, I think that's a majority at one time, but I think it's starting to come back because people are saying, wait a minute. You know, I think people have to learn that it's not free. The stuff that people are getting, it's not free. And we live in a state here right now, I believe California is one of 5 states, I think I read, I hope I got this right, that there's more people living on welfare than paying into it. I'm not a math major, but that's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for disaster. And that's what's happening. That's why people in this cities are claiming bankruptcy. It's the independent voters that usually the liberals and the conservatives fight for, right? Because those are the poll sitters. That, you know, those are the ones you try to win the vote. Because you're always going to get people that are just going to say, the heck with it, I'm getting my free stuff. Or their mentalities, because my father thought he was a liberal his whole life in Minnesota, Walter, you know, Mondale and Hubert Humphrey guy. But if I quiz my dad on 10 subjects, 8 of those 10 things would certainly make him conservative. But it was ingrained in him growing up in an Iowa farm with his, you know, tough Norwegian background, and my grandparents and uncles and everything. It was just, this was their mentality, and you couldn't get them to change their mind on things. But, you know, sometimes common sense isn't enough for people to make them change their mind. But how do you educate people? How do you, hopefully a movie like Alongside Night will open up some eyes. I hope people will get out there and see what's going on in the country right now, because this is reflecting what's happening in our world right now. You can make a difference if you want to make a difference. It's a matter of standing up for yourself and having a voice. I mean, people are afraid to, you know, the only thing to fear is fear itself, right? And that's what a lot of people are afraid of. They're afraid of making these decisions in life. A lot of people that are living off the government, living off our tax dollars, a lot of those people are people that have just given up on life. They've set limitations for themselves, whether other people did it from whether they did it to themselves. They're afraid to even have a chance to try to be successful because they're afraid of failure. I mean, I used to caddy at this private country club when I was in high school. And I asked every one of these guys, wealthy guys, how do you become wealthy? And they said, I failed, but didn't let it stop me. That was huge for me as a kid. It was huge. My dad was a public school teacher. You know, I was the 4th of 5 kids. We didn't have any money in the family. You know, I just remember my dad anguishing over the bills at the end of every month, getting the last $3. But one thing my dad did instill with me, even though he thought he was such a big liberal, he said, don't expect handouts in your life. He said, work hard. He put that in all 5 of his kids. I started a paper out when I was 9 years old. For 7 years, I got up at 4:30 in the morning, delivering 80 newspapers during the 5 months of Minnesota's 30 below winters. Yeah. But, I learned responsibility quite early. And I'm trying to instill that into my kids as well. Work. You want something, work for it. I mean, people don't wash rental cars. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. When you earn it yourself and buy it yourself, you value it a lot more than having somebody just hand you, here's your phone because we feel bad for you. I'm all for helping people who need help, so I don't want letters. Anybody who needs help, I'm all for that. I have my own after-school program. I work with 12,000 kids downtown LA, and the worst school system in the state has a 54% dropout rate. The 12,000 kids I work with, we have a 98% graduation rate, a 67% higher GPA. The LA Unified School Board should be embarrassed. I do a better job than what they do with the teachers that they have, because they hold everybody back. There's this purposeful dumbing down of the kids in our culture. We've been doing that for decades now. Media's done since the 60s. I mean, Hollywood was very conservative up through the 50s. And movies were pretty much just G-rated movies. You had the underground pornos and stuff like that, but it was a G-rated culture where there was always a song, but the 60s changed things. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, why not change, okay, rock and roll, I love it too. But it's the mentality of people and the way that the media forces you watch any television show, any movie, is it ever, if it's political, does it ever have a Republican president? And, but we get the governments we deserve. And there's so many people that don't vote because they think their vote doesn't count. It counts. Well, obviously, Hercules got the whole ball rolling for me. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have a career at all. And it is hard to believe it was 21 years ago we started filming. I learned a lot. Being on the set for the first year was 5 movies with Anthony Quinn, which was amazing. And then we just took off. And by the 4th season, we became the most watched show in the world. And it was an honor for me to be part of that program. And Peter Jackson actually used to come on a set quite a bit because we shot down in New Zealand, and he was handpicking people he wanted to be on Lord of the Rings just to see what their progression was working on the series with me. So half of my crew went on to work on Lord of the Rings when we finished shooting, and ended up winning Academy Awards. But it was huge. It was huge for me, and that series led to myself getting Andromeda with Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda. I got a call from Majel Roddenberry and getting a 5-year run on that show. It was supposed to go 7 years, but the Tribune company out of Chicago went bankrupt. We were the only thing making money for them. Stargate never, ever, ever beat us in the ratings. We were the #1 show in first-run syndication for all 5 years, and I got to get that in because I know the guys from Stargate. And they got a 10-year run because they had MGM and Sony behind them. So we just had a little Tribune company, and they lost their money because of the Chicago Cubs, probably. But it was fun, and it was a wonderful 12-year run, and that just sort of kicked off everything for me in terms of getting any other work. Well, the biggest change, obviously, was just the schedule. It was 14-hour work days. It was 2 hours a day lifting weights. 17, 18 hours door to door was pretty typical. But I think not being in the limelight of America, I was in New Zealand, so we're away from everything. I mean, little New Zealand had nothing like this before. And we only had, it was myself and one other producer, Eric Grundeman, that were the only Americans down there full time. Rob Tappert and Sam Raimi were our exec producers, and Tappert would come down more often. Raimi only showed up at the Christmas party at Universal and shook my hand and said, "You're making me a lot of money, kid, thanks," and walk away. And I go, "Well, put me in your movie, make me a bad guy in Spider-Man." But anyway, it never happened. But yeah, I mean, the biggest change was just getting used to that fame that I saw as I flew back to the States, and then realizing the show was starting to show in 176 countries around the world. So it was crazy.
Well, I mean, first of all, historically, I think it's me and L. Frank Baum going from writing the book to then making the movie. Of course, he did it in the silent film era. But long before you had the MGM musical, L. Frank Baum had been producing Wizard of Oz and silent films. So I can't think of anybody else in between. I mean, you do have people like William Goldman who go from novel to screenwriting, but to go from novelist to total filmmaker, where you're writing and directing and producing and acting in, I just can't think of anybody else who does that. So it's an amazing experience. I had a day on set where Kevin and Sam Sorbo as Dr. and Mrs. Martin Vreeland were doing a scene together, and I just started choking up. I couldn't breathe because I had imagined this scene 35 years before, as a kid sitting behind a typewriter, and here it was real in front of me, and it was just, I was like in the Twilight Zone, and I know what that's like because I've written for the Twilight Zone. It's an amazing experience, and of course, there are things that had to be changed. As you saw in the interview you just did with Kevin Sorbo, a lot of the things which I not predicted but projected in the novel have come to pass. It was called science fiction when it first came out, and I don't think it's science fiction anymore. Too much of it has happened. Too many of the events that I put in the future in my novel are now in the past as history. But there is, so I had to bring it up to date and put it into the future again, and still have events that hadn't happened yet, and also in the process of adaptation, of adapting the technology. I moved the story from New York City to Las Vegas. Well, I mean, one of the things you do as a writer is you use the past as a basis for what you're going to project into the future. I mean, we've had the decadence caused by hyperinflation in Weimar Germany. You see that in the movie Cabaret. It was called the wheelbarrow inflation because literally prices were changing so fast. Now we haven't had that level of inflation. What Ludwig von Mises, the great Austrian economist, calls Krakaboom, Katastrophenhaus in German. Yeah, we haven't had that yet. But in the 70s, early 70s, was when I was writing, beginning in the Nixon administration, inflation was so bad that Nixon imposed wage price controls. And then during Gerald Ford, we have the buttons, whip inflation now, win. And so by the time you got to the Carter administration, things were just, totally going out of control. And very frankly, there was quite a possibility that if Carter had won that election and Reagan hadn't come in, if he had continued his policies, we might have seen a hyperinflation of the Weimar level in the United States, because it's a vicious cycle. The government spends right now, today, the amount of federal debt that is already accumulated, not to mention the additional add-ons to the deficit every year, there's no point of taxation on the Laffer curve that's able to pay for that. And so there has to be devaluation of the money through quantitative easing in order to do that. And we've been lucky so far that other countries have been willing to use the dollar as a reserve currency and eat our debt. But that's not going to continue, as you have burgeoning economies, particularly China right now, that are going to be unwilling to do that. People are going to start deciding to use something else other than the dollar as their reserve currencies, and the debt is going to fall squarely on the American people, and we are going to have that hyperinflation. The mathematics is unavoidable. Well, that's exactly the point. The point is that was the lesson to be watched and the lesson to be learned, and they haven't learned the lesson. I have joked that if you were to write the Declaration of Independence today, it would read like a 12-step program. Yes, I mean, getting things for free is addicting, but it's not for free. It has to come from somewhere. That means that somebody else is paying for it, and as the amount that is being given out burgeons, and the source of the people who make things shrinks, as the manufacturing base moves overseas, as employment basically becomes service industry jobs at the lowest level, and we lose our manufacturing base, we lose our technology base. That great American ideas are immediately put into practice elsewhere in the world. Mm-hmm. The speed you get for the internet in South Korea is 5 to 10 times higher than we can get it in the United States. When that happens, when we are no longer the cutting edge as we were for much of the Industrial Revolution, then we lose what made America unique, what made America special, which was freedom, which was not only, it wasn't free for everybody. Obviously, there were problems if you were black or a woman or Chinese or Native American. But if you were one of those immigrants who came over a period of hundreds of years, you were doing great. The theme of Alongside Night is you don't have to fight the government to be free. You simply have to disobey. You have to say the Declaration of Independence had it right, that we have these rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Bill of Rights tried to enshrine those rights in a constitutional form, and it failed to do so. So what do you do when government doesn't work for the people anymore? You do what they did in 1776, and you say no. Now that doesn't mean that you have to take out your muskets or the 21st century equivalent and start shooting the government, although you might have to shoot back. Okay, you don't shoot at them, but you might have to shoot back. But what you mainly want to do is understand that, starting with Thoreau and his lessons of nonviolent resistance spread to Gandhi, and then back here to Martin Luther King and the protest movements, we can say no effectively. And not only that, they need to be aware that if they are going to attack us, if they are going to try to treat the people as subjects, as did the original tyrant on this continent, King George III, the Second Amendment has preserved the best armed people in the world. That would make an insurgency in Vietnam or Iraq look ridiculous by comparison. And I'm not just talking about guns. I'm talking about ham radio. I'm talking about 3D printers and CNC machines. The possibility of resistance here makes any tyrant have to look at it and say, we can't do that. And so if we simply stand up for ourselves and say, we will not comply, we're not going to fight you, but we're not going to obey you anymore. Your laws are unjust, your laws are criminal, and law is going to come out of the marketplace as it did during the common law period through much of history. Now, let me disagree with Kevin Sorbo on one point. I think that the solution doesn't come within the political system. I think the political system is irreparably broken. Okay. I think it comes out of the agora, and that it's the agorist movement which is going to save us. And that means that we build marketplaces. We use the jiu-jitsu approach that when we are attacked, we move out of the way. We use stealth means. If the NSA thinks that they can hold secrets, so can the market. There's a long history of banking secrecy which can be used in underground marketplaces. In Alongside Night, I show underground shopping centers that literally, physically, people go to make wholesale orders. But Dread Pirate Roberts is quoted in quotations that you can find to this day on Forbes.com, saying that he got the idea for Silk Road from reading Alongside Night. That's my favorite endorsement on the book, and I've got Milton Friedman and Ron Paul and Glenn Beck and Anthony Burgess, saying nice things about the book. But my favorite is the Dread Pirate Roberts saying this is what inspired him. I am happy that this is an example I can use. Okay, and even though supposedly the Dread Pirate Roberts has been taken down, and people are saying that it's a certain gentleman who's incarcerated right now awaiting trial. These sorts of things continue digitally, and I think that they can also coordinate in the physical world and such a thing. A shipping container can hide anything, and it doesn't need to be a terrorist device. It could be a market.